They called me on Thursday afternoon. My son's voice came through the speaker of my phone while I was replacing the flange on the downstairs toilet. The kind of job nobody wants to do, but somebody has to. The wax ring had failed, and water had been seeping into the subfloor for God knows how long. I had the toilet off its mount, the old ring scraped away, and my hands smelled like something that died in a sewer. "Dad, hey, you got a minute?" I wiped my hands on a rag that wouldn't get any cleaner. "I'm here." "So there's this meeting tomorrow, 1 o'clock, downtown office." "What kind of meeting?" "Just formalities, quarterly review stuff, operational updates. You know how it goes." I didn't know how it went. I'd built the company from a single truck and a handshake deal 23 years ago. I knew every operational update before it became operational. But my son had been running the day-to-day for the last 18 months, ever since I'd agreed to step back and let the next generation take the lead. That was the phrase everyone used. Next generation. "You need me there?" I asked. "Honestly, probably not. It's really just paperwork. Signing off on stuff we already approved last month. Helen said it might actually slow things down if too many people show up." Helen was the family attorney. She'd been with us for 9 years. She smiled a lot and never quite answered questions directly. "Your sister going?" "Yeah, Jess will be there. But she's got the legal background, so it makes sense. You know how she is with contracts." I did know. My daughter had passed the bar on her first try and spent 3 years at a corporate firm before I brought her in-house. She was smart, precise. She never made mistakes unless they were deliberate. "What about the spouses?" A pause. Just half a second, but I caught it. "Probably. I mean, they're stakeholders now, so Helen thought it'd be good to have them in the loop." Stakeholders. That was new. My son had married a woman who'd never worked a day in a job that required steel-toed boots. My daughter's husband had played college football, blown out his knee, and landed in corporate security consulting, which, as far as I could tell, meant he told people they needed better cameras and charged them 6 figures for the advice. "Okay," I said. "I'll sit this one out." "You sure? I mean, if you want to come—" "No, you're right. If it's just formalities, no point in me driving downtown. I've got a toilet to finish anyway." He laughed. It sounded relieved. "Still doing your own plumbing, huh?" "Somebody's got to." "All right, Dad. I'll send you the minutes after." "Sure." He hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment, then set it on the edge of the sink. The new wax ring sat in its packaging on the floor. The toilet was still off to the side, the bolts exposed like broken teeth. I picked up the ring and peeled the plastic away. It smelled like petroleum and factory dust. Formalities. I pressed the ring into place and lowered the toilet back onto the flange. The bolts slid through. I threaded the nuts on by hand, then tightened them with a wrench, alternating sides so the pressure distributed evenly. When I turned the water back on, nothing leaked. I washed my hands 3 times and still smelled the wax. By the time I got upstairs, it was almost 5. I made a sandwich and ate it standing at the kitchen counter. The house was quiet. My wife had left me 4 years ago. The kids said I should sell the place, move into something smaller, something modern. But I'd built the deck myself. I'd planted the trees in the backyard. The mortgage had been paid off for a decade. I wasn't going anywhere. I spent the evening in my office, which used to be the guest bedroom before we stopped having guests. I had files going back to the beginning. Paper records, because I didn't trust everything to live in the cloud. I pulled the folder labeled Corporate Structure and flipped through the articles of incorporation, the operating agreements, the amendments we'd filed over the years as the company grew. There was a clause in there I'd written myself. I remembered the lawyer I'd hired back then, a guy named Foster who worked out of a strip mall and charged $200 an hour. He'd looked at what I wanted and said it was unusual but not illegal. I'd insisted. He'd shrugged and drafted it. It was still there. Buried in Section 7, Subsection C. Emergency reversion of operational control in the event of procedural override without quorum notification. I'd written it because I didn't trust silence. If something major was happening, I wanted to know. And if I didn't know, I wanted a way back in. I read it 3 times, then closed the folder and put it back in the drawer. The meeting was at 1 o'clock. I didn't set an alarm. I woke up at 6:30 like I always did, made coffee, and sat on the back deck. The yard needed mowing, the fence needed staining. I made a mental list and didn't write it down. At 10:15, my phone buzzed. An email. The subject line said, "Meeting agenda, confidential." I opened it. The sender was Helen, the attorney. The recipients were my son, my daughter, both of their spouses, and 2 names I didn't recognize. One was labeled external compliance. The other was labeled board proxy. I wasn't on the list, but I'd been CC'd by mistake. I could see it in the header. Someone had autofilled my name and hadn't noticed. Probably my daughter. She was meticulous, but autofill was autofill. I read the agenda. Item 1. Approval of revised voting thresholds. Item 2. Transfer of operational signing authority. Item 3. Ratification of emergency governance protocols. Item 4. Appointment of interim leadership structure. There was an attachment. I downloaded it. It was a PDF, 22 pages, single-spaced. I printed it and read it with a pen in my hand. By page 4, I understood. By page 9, I was angry. By page 16, I was calm. They hadn't forged anything. They hadn't lied, not technically. Everything was legal. The votes had been structured so that my absence constituted tacit approval. The timelines had been compressed so that ratification would occur within 72 hours. Emergency provisions I'd agreed to years ago, back when emergency meant the company might collapse, had been reactivated and repurposed. They weren't stealing from me. They were repositioning me. By Monday, I would still own shares. I would still receive distributions. But I wouldn't control anything. I wouldn't sign anything. I wouldn't approve anything. I would be a passenger in the vehicle I'd built from the ground up. I sat in my office for a long time. Then I went back to Section 7, subsection C. The clause had 2 triggers. The first was procedural override. That was happening right now. The second was quorum notification. That meant every stakeholder with original voting authority had to be informed in writing at least 48 hours before ratification. I hadn't been informed. I'd been excluded. Which meant the override was invalid. Which meant I could reverse it. But only if I acted before Monday. I checked the time. It was 11:30. The meeting would start in 90 minutes. By 3 o'clock, everything would be signed. By Monday morning, it would be filed. I opened my laptop and started typing. I didn't go to the meeting. That was important. If I showed up, it would tip them off. They'd adjust. They'd delay. They'd say the email had been sent in error and the meeting was postponed pending full stakeholder review. They'd cover themselves and I'd lose the window. So I stayed home. I made a list instead. The company had grown over 2 decades into something that looked simple from the outside but was held together by 1,000 invisible dependencies. I'd built it that way on purpose. Decentralization meant no single point of failure. It also meant no single point of control. I started with the vendors. We had 14 primary suppliers. 3 of them were under contract with automatic renewal clauses. 2 of those renewals were coming up in the next 30 days. The clauses required approval from the original contracting authority. That was me. If we paid penalties, the board started asking questions. I pulled the files and highlighted the dates. Next, I looked at the operational systems. My son was good at sales. He was good at client relations. He was good at showing up to conferences and shaking hands and making people feel like they mattered. But he didn't understand the machinery. He didn't know which systems were redundant and which ones were load-bearing. I did. There was a database we used for logistics coordination. It tracked shipments, routes, delivery windows, driver assignments. It had been custom built by a contractor I'd hired 12 years ago, a guy who'd since retired and moved to New Mexico. The system had no support contract. It had no backup administrator. It ran on a server in a colocation facility that renewed its lease every 18 months. The lease was up in 40 days. If the renewal didn't happen, the server got wiped and the data disappeared. We had backups, but restoring from backup required access credentials that only 2 people had. One of them was me. The other was a guy named Pruitt, the operations manager. He was 61 years old and had been with me since the beginning. He didn't know the big picture, but he knew the systems. He was loyal because loyalty was the only currency he understood. I called him. Pruitt. It's me. Hey boss, what's up? You at the meeting? What meeting? Downtown, 1 o'clock. Nobody told me about a meeting. I smiled. Good. Listen, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not ask why. A pause. Then, okay. Go to the colo facility. Pull the server logs for the logistics database. I want to know who's accessed it in the last 6 months. You think somebody's been in there? I think I want to know. When do you need it? Today. I'm on it. He hung up. Pruitt didn't waste time on goodbyes. I spent the next 2 hours going through the files. I made notes. I didn't make copies. Copies could be found. Notes could be burned. At 3:30, my phone rang. My daughter. I let it ring 4 times, then answered. Hey, Jess? Dad? Her voice was tight, professional, the voice she used when she was trying not to sound like she was trying. Just wanted to check in. You doing okay? I'm fine. Finished the toilet. Good, that's good. A pause. So, the meeting wrapped up. Everything went smoothly. Great. Yeah, we'll send you the minutes. Just, standard stuff. Nothing you need to worry about. I wasn't worried. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, well, if you have any questions, just let me know. Will do. She hung up. I stared at the phone. My daughter had always been the careful one. She thought 3 moves ahead. She didn't make mistakes unless they served a purpose. The email hadn't been a mistake. She'd wanted me to see it. Not because she felt guilty, because she wanted me to know. She wanted me to understand what was happening and accept it. She thought I'd read it, get angry, maybe make a phone call, maybe send a nasty email and then move on. She thought I'd realize I was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and I'd let it go. She didn't think I'd fight back. That was her mistake. I spent Friday evening pulling together everything I needed. Documents, dates, clauses. I didn't have a lawyer yet. I didn't need one. The law was clear. The operating agreement was clear. The only question was whether I had the nerve to use it. I did. Saturday morning, I drove out to the distribution yard. It was closed on weekends, but I still had a key. The yard covered 11 acres on the east side of town near the rail depot. We had 6 warehouses, a fleet maintenance building, and a truck lot that could hold 80 vehicles. I parked near the main office and walked the perimeter. The fence needed repair in 3 places. The cameras were outdated. Half the light poles had burned out bulbs. My son had been talking about upgrading security for 2 years, but talking didn't fix anything. I made notes. Then I drove to the main client site, a regional transit hub we'd been servicing for 9 years. It was a government contract, which meant paperwork, compliance audits, and penalty clauses that could bankrupt a smaller company. We'd survived because I knew how to read the requirements and deliver exactly what was promised. The contract was up for renewal in November. The client liaison was a woman named Whitmore who'd been in her position for 6 years. She knew me. She didn't know my son. I didn't call her. Not yet. But I would. By Sunday, I had a plan. It wasn't complicated. Complicated plans failed. Simple plans succeeded because nobody saw them coming. I would wait until Monday morning. I would file the paperwork. I would invoke the emergency reversion clause. I would reclaim operational control. And I would do it before they knew what was happening. Then I would dismantle what they'd tried to build, not out of anger, out of necessity, because if I let them take control, they'd run the company into the ground within 3 years. My son didn't have the discipline. My daughter didn't have the patience. Their spouses didn't have the knowledge. And I didn't build something for 23 years just to watch it collapse, because my kids thought they were smarter than they were. Sunday night, I got another email. This one wasn't a mistake. It was from my son's wife. The subject line said, "Family Update." I opened it. It was a group message, sent to extended family, old friends, a few business acquaintances, the kind of message you send when you want to control the narrative before someone else does. The text was short and friendly and poison. "Hi everyone. Just wanted to let you know that we've made some exciting changes to the family business. After many conversations, we've decided it's time for the next generation to take full leadership. This has been in the works for a while, and we're so grateful for all the support. Dad is doing great, and looking forward to a well-deserved break. Thanks for being part of this journey with us." I read it 3 times, then I deleted it. A well-deserved break. Like I was retired. Like I'd agreed to step aside. Like this was mutual. I opened a new document and started writing a response. Then I stopped. Responding would make me look defensive. Defensive looked weak. I deleted the draft and closed the laptop. Let them think I didn't care. Let them think I was done. By the time they realized I wasn't, it would be too late. Friday morning, I put on a suit. I hadn't worn one in 6 months. It felt tight around the shoulders. The tie felt like a noose. But appearances mattered, and I needed to look like someone who belonged in a boardroom. I got to the hotel at 9:30. The meeting was at 10. I didn't want to be early, but I didn't want to be late either. The conference room was on the 3rd floor. I took the stairs. When I got there, the door was closed. I could hear voices inside. I waited in the hallway. At 9:55, the door opened. Helen stepped out. She saw me and stopped. "You're here." "I was invited. We weren't sure you'd come." "Here I am." She held the door open. "Come in." The room was large and sterile. White walls, gray carpet, a long table in the center. There were 6 chairs on each side. At the head of the table sat a man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He was reading a document. My son and daughter were already seated. So were their spouses. And so were 2 other people I didn't recognize. The external board members. I sat down at the opposite end of the table. The man with the silver hair looked up. "Mr. Brennan, thank you for joining us. My name is Aldridge. I've been appointed as the independent arbitrator for this proceeding." I nodded. He set the document down. "I've reviewed the materials submitted by both parties. I've also reviewed the corporate operating agreement and the emergency reversion filing. Before we begin, I want to make sure everyone understands the scope of this meeting. We're here to determine whether the reversion was valid and whether operational control should be restored to Mr. Brennan or remain with the current leadership structure. Does everyone understand?" Heads nodded around the table. "Good. Let's start with the complainant. Ms. Brennan, you filed the dispute. Please present your case." My daughter stood. She had a folder in front of her. She opened it and pulled out a set of documents. "Thank you, Mr. Aldridge. The complaint is straightforward. My father filed an emergency reversion based on a procedural technicality. Specifically, he claims he wasn't notified of the meeting on Friday. But the reality is that he was notified. He declined to attend. He told my brother, and I quote, 'If it's just formalities, no point in me driving downtown.'" She looked at me. "He chose not to attend. That's not the same as not being notified." Aldridge made a note. "Mr. Brennan, do you dispute that you were notified?" I stood. "I was told about the meeting, but I wasn't told what it was for. I was told it was formalities. I was told it was routine. I was not told that control of the company was being transferred." "The agenda was sent by email," my daughter said. "After the meeting was already scheduled. and I wasn't on the recipient list. I only saw it because someone CC'd me by mistake. Aldridge looked at Helen. Is that accurate? Helen hesitated. The email was sent to the primary stakeholders. Mr. Brennan was not included on the original distribution list. Why not? Because he'd already declined to attend. But he hadn't seen the agenda when he declined. Helen didn't answer. Aldridge made another note. Continue, Ms. Brennan. My daughter pulled out another document. Even if we accept that the notification was flawed, the reversion itself is invalid. The emergency reversion clause requires a legitimate emergency. There was no emergency. The company is running smoothly. Revenue is up. Clients are satisfied. The only disruption has been caused by my father's actions since Monday. She sat down. Aldridge looked at me. Mr. Brennan, your response? I stood again. The clause doesn't define what constitutes an emergency. It simply requires that procedural override occur without proper notification. That happened. The override happened. The notification didn't. The reversion is valid. But you're disrupting operations, my son said. He was half out of his chair. You've locked people out of systems. You've fired employees. You've refused to sign vendor contracts. You're sabotaging the company. I'm restoring order. You're causing chaos. Aldridge held up a hand. Let's keep this civil. Mr. Brennan, why did you terminate employees? Because they were unnecessary. My son hired 4 people in the last year. The company didn't need them. They were hired to justify a larger leadership structure, not to improve operations. That's not true, my son said. Which of them increased revenue? He didn't answer. Which of them reduced costs? Silence. They were hired to make you look busy, not to make the company better. My son's face went red. His hands were clenched. For a moment, I thought he was going to lunge across the table, but his wife put a hand on his arm, and he stayed seated. Aldridge made more notes. What about the vendor contracts? I'm reviewing them. The vendors say you're refusing to sign. I'm reviewing them, I repeated. If the terms are acceptable, I'll sign. If they're not, I won't. And if they lapse, then we'll find new vendors. That will cause disruptions. Short-term disruptions, long-term improvement. Aldridge leaned back in his chair. Let me ask you something, Mr. Brennan. What's your end game here? What are you trying to accomplish? I looked at him. I'm trying to protect the company I built from people who don't understand it. Your children, he said. Yes. You don't think they're capable of running it. I know they're not. My daughter stood. This is exactly the problem. He doesn't trust us. He doesn't respect us. He thinks he's the only person who can run the company. And that's not true. We've been running it for the last 18 months. And it's been fine. It's been fine because the systems I built are still in place, I said. But you don't understand those systems. You don't know what holds them together. You think you can change things without consequences. But you can't. You're paranoid, my son said. I'm realistic. Aldridge held up a hand again. Let's take a break. 15 minutes. Everyone step outside and cool off. We filed out of the room. I went to the hallway and stood by the window. My son and daughter went the other direction, toward the elevators. Their spouses followed. Helen stayed in the conference room talking to Aldridge. I watched the parking lot below. Cars coming and going, people walking in and out of the hotel. Normal life. Uncomplicated. After 15 minutes, we went back inside. Aldridge was standing at the head of the table. I've made a decision, he said. Everyone sat down. He opened a folder and pulled out a document. Based on the operating agreement and the emergency reversion filing, I find that Mr. Brennan's reversion was valid. The procedural override occurred without proper notification. The clause was triggered. Control is restored to Mr. Brennan. My son stood up. That's insane. Sit down, please. You can't just sit down. My son sat. Aldridge continued. However, I also find that Mr. Brennan's actions since Monday have been unnecessarily disruptive, terminating employees without cause, refusing to sign vendor contracts, and locking people out of systems are not reasonable exercises of authority. They're retaliatory. He looked at me. If you want to run the company, you need to run it responsibly. That means signing the contracts. That means restoring system access. That means acting like a leader, not like someone settling a score. I didn't respond. He set the document down. I'm ordering both parties to work together to transition control in a way that minimizes disruption. You have 1 week. If you can't resolve this, we'll reconvene, and I'll impose a solution. Is that clear? No one spoke. Is that clear? He repeated. Yes, my daughter said. Yes, I said. Aldridge nodded. Good, this meeting is adjourned. Everyone stood and filed out. I stayed seated. Helen walked over. You got what you wanted. Not quite. What else do you want? I looked at her. I want them to understand. Understand what? That this isn't a game. She didn't respond. She just walked out. I sat there for another minute. Then I stood and left. When I got to the parking lot, my son was waiting by my car. This isn't over, he said. I know. He stepped closer. You think you won, but you didn't. All you did was buy yourself time. That's all I need. We're not going to work with you. We're going to fight you every step of the way. Good, I said. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. He stared at me. Then he turned and walked away. I got in my car and drove home. The weekend was quiet. Too quiet. I spent Saturday at the distribution yard, walking the perimeter again. I made notes. I didn't fix anything. I just observed. On Sunday, I stayed home. I didn't go to the office. I didn't check email. I sat on the back deck and watched the birds. My phone rang twice. Both times, it was my daughter. I didn't answer. Monday morning, I got to the office early. Pruitt was already there. Got something you need to see, he said. He handed me a printout. It was an email chain between my son, my daughter, and Helen. The subject line said, strategy. I read it. They were planning to delay, to stall, to make it impossible for me to run the company even if I had legal control. They were going to tie up every decision in committees. They were going to demand sign-offs from the board. They were going to slow everything down until I gave up. Where did you get this? I asked. Someone forwarded it to me. Didn't say who. I folded the printout and put it in my pocket. Thanks. What are you going to do? I'm going to finish this. I spent the morning drafting a new set of documents. Not legal filings, not complaints, just a simple restructuring proposal. I was going to eliminate the board. The operating agreement allowed for it. Under Section 9, subsection A, the original founder could dissolve any advisory body created after the initial incorporation. The board my daughter had created qualified. I printed the documents and walked to Helen's office. She was on the phone. She saw me and held up a finger. I waited. When she hung up, she looked at me. What do you want? I'm dissolving the board. Her face went pale. You can't do that. I can. Section 9, subsection A. She opened her laptop and started typing. After a moment, she stopped. That clause hasn't been used in 20 years. Doesn't matter. It's still active. You're making a huge mistake. You've said that before. She stood up. If you do this, there's no going back. You'll lose any support you have left. I don't need support. I need control. She stared at me. Then she sat down. Fine. Do what you want, but don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. I left her office and went back to mine. At noon, I filed the dissolution with the state. It would take 3 business days to process. By Friday, the board would be gone. At 1 o'clock, my daughter called. What did you just do? I dissolved the board. You can't do that. I already did. This is insane. You're burning everything down. I'm cleaning house. You're destroying the company. The company will be fine once you're out of the way. She hung up. At 3 o'clock, my son showed up. He didn't knock. He just walked in and slammed the door behind him. "You're out of control," he said. "I'm in control. That's the problem. You can't keep doing this. You can't just change the rules whenever you don't like them." "I didn't change the rules. I used the rules that were already there." "That's not how this works." "That's exactly how this works." He stepped closer to the desk. "You're going to regret this." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Tuesday morning, I filed the founder's override. The paperwork was simple: 1 page, 3 signatures, mine, a notary, and a witness. Pruitt was the witness. "You know what this does?" he asked. "Yes." "You sure you want to do it?" "Yes." He signed. I filed it with the state at 9 o'clock. It would be processed by end of business. By Wednesday, it would be official. At 10 o'clock, Helen called. "What did you just file?" "You'll see." "Tell me now." "No." She hung up. At 11, my daughter showed up. She walked into my office and threw a folder on my desk. "What is this?" I opened it. It was a copy of the founder's override. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. "You can't do this." "I already did. This is illegal. It's completely legal." "I'll fight it." "Go ahead." She stared at me. "You're trying to erase us." "I'm trying to save the company." "From what?" "From you." She didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me like she didn't recognize me. "You've changed." "No?" "You have." She turned and walked out. At noon, my son sent an email to the entire staff. It said I was acting unilaterally and that the board would be meeting to discuss next steps. I replied to the email. I CC'd everyone. There is no board. It was dissolved yesterday. Any decisions made by the board are void. All operational authority rests with me. If you have questions, ask me directly. My son didn't respond. At 2 o'clock, Pruitt knocked on the door. "Tri-State Freight pulled their trucks. We're short on capacity." "How short?" 40%. "Can we cover it?" "For now. But if this goes on for more than a week, we're in trouble." "It won't." He left. I spent the rest of the afternoon making phone calls. I called every vendor we'd ever worked with. I asked about capacity. I asked about rates. I asked about timelines. By 5 o'clock, I had 3 backup options. None of them were perfect, but they were enough. At 6, I left the office and drove to the distribution yard. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and red. I parked near the main gate and walked the perimeter. The fence still needed repair. The lights still needed replacing. But the trucks were lined up. The shipments were moving. The machine was still running. I stood there for a long time, watching. Then I drove home. The house was cold. I turned up the heat and made dinner. Then I sat in my office and waited. At 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my daughter. "We need to talk. In person. Tomorrow." I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, another text. "Please." I stared at the phone. Then I typed a response. 10 o'clock, my office. She didn't reply. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about what would happen tomorrow, what she would say, what I would say, how it would end. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew it was necessary. Wednesday morning, I got to the office at 8. Pruitt was already there. "Your daughter's here," he said. "Where?" "Conference room." I walked down the hallway. The door was closed. I opened it. My daughter was sitting at the table. So was my son. So were their spouses. And so was Helen. I stopped in the doorway. "I thought it was just you." "It's all of us," my daughter said. I stepped inside and closed the door. "What do you want?" "We want to settle this," she said. "There's nothing to settle." "Yes, there is. You filed the founder's override. You dissolved the board. You've taken everything." "I took back what was mine. It was never just yours. I built it." "And we grew it," my son said. I looked at him. "You maintained it. Barely. That's not fair." "It's accurate." Helen leaned forward. Let's focus on solutions, not blame. I sat down. What kind of solutions? We're proposing a buyout, my daughter said. I stared at her. A buyout. Yes, we buy you out. You walk away. Everyone moves on. How much? She slid a piece of paper across the table. I picked it up and read it. The number was insultingly low. I set the paper down. No. That's a fair offer, Helen said. No, it's not. It's based on current valuation. It's based on what you think I'll accept because I'm tired. I'm not tired. And I'm not selling. My son stood up. Then what do you want? I looked at him. I want you to leave. Leave the company? Yes. You can't force us out. I can. The founder's override gives me that authority. That's insane. That's the law. My daughter stood. If you do this, we'll sue. Go ahead. We'll take this public. Good luck. She stared at me. Why are you doing this? Because you tried to take something from me without asking, and because you thought I wouldn't notice, or that I wouldn't care. We didn't take anything. We were trying to help. You were trying to replace me. Because you were in the way. The room went silent. I stood up. Get out. What? Get out of my office. Get out of my company. Get out of my life. My son stepped forward. You don't mean that. I mean every word. He looked at my daughter, then at Helen, then back at me. Fine, he said. We'll go. But you're going to regret this. Maybe. But I'll regret it on my own terms. They filed out. Helen stayed behind. You're making a terrible mistake, she said. You've said that before. I mean it this time. So do I. She shook her head and left. I sat at the table for a long time. Then I went back to my office and made a phone call. Thursday morning, the company was quiet. My son didn't show up. My daughter didn't show up. Their spouses didn't show up. It was just me and Pruitt and the employees who'd been there from the beginning. I spent the morning signing contracts, the vendor renewals, the client agreements, everything I'd been holding back. By noon, operations were back to normal. At 1 o'clock, I got a call from Whitmore. Mr. Brennan, I heard there were some changes. There were. Are you still in charge? Yes. Good. Just wanted to confirm. Confirmed. She hung up. At 3 o'clock, I called a staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the conference room. I know there's been a lot of uncertainty, I said. I want to clear that up. The leadership structure has been simplified. I'm in charge. If you have questions, ask me. If you have problems, bring them to me. If you need direction, I'll give it to you. That's how it's going to work from now on. No one said anything. Any questions? Silence. Good. Get back to work. They filed out. Pruitt stayed behind. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. You sure? I'm sure. He nodded and left. I went back to my office and sat at the desk. The folder with the founder's override was still sitting there. I opened it and read the clause one more time. Then I closed it and put it in the drawer. It was done. Friday morning, I got to the office at 6. The building was empty. The lights were off. I turned them on and made coffee. At 7, Pruitt showed up. Got something for you, he said. He handed me an envelope. I opened it. Inside was a letter from my daughter. It was short. Dad, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. You won. You got everything you wanted. The company is yours. We're out. But you lost something too. You lost us. I don't know if you care. Maybe you don't. Maybe you never did. But I hope someday you realize that this didn't have to happen. We could have worked together. We could have built something bigger. But you didn't trust us. And now it's too late. I hope the company was worth it. Jess. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it back in the envelope. I didn't respond. At 8 o'clock, Helen called. I'm officially resigning, she said. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else do you want me to say? She paused. I thought you'd try to convince me to stay. Why would I do that? Because I've been with you for 9 years. And now you're leaving. People leave. She hung up. At 9 o'clock, I got an email from the state. The founder's override had been processed. It was official. I printed the confirmation and filed it. At 10 o'clock, I called a meeting with the remaining department heads. There were 4 of them: operations, sales, finance, logistics. We're starting over, I said. Clean slate. I want proposals from each of you by Monday. What's working? What's not? What needs to change? Don't hold back. I want the truth. They nodded and left. I spent the rest of the day reviewing files. By 5 o'clock, I'd gone through every contract, every agreement, every policy. Everything was in order. I left the office and drove to the distribution yard. The fence had been repaired, the lights had been replaced, the trucks were lined up and ready to roll. I stood there for a moment, watching. Then I got in my car and drove home. The house was dark. I turned on the lights and made dinner. Then I sat in my office and opened the drawer. Inside was the folder with the original operating agreement, the one I'd written 23 years ago. I pulled it out and read it. Section 7, subsection C, emergency reversion. Section 7, subsection D, founder's override. I'd written those clauses because I knew this day might come. I knew that someday someone might try to take what I'd built, and I wanted to be ready. I closed the folder and put it back in the drawer. Then I turned off the light and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up early. I made coffee and sat on the back deck. The yard was quiet. The sun was rising. The birds were singing. I thought about my son, my daughter, their spouses. I thought about what I'd done. I didn't regret it. Not yet. Maybe I would someday. Maybe I'd wake up and realize I'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe I'd realize that losing my family wasn't worth saving the company. But today wasn't that day. Today, the company was mine. And that was enough. I finished my coffee and went inside. There was work to do. Monday came. I got to the office at 6. The department heads were waiting. They handed me their proposals. I read them one by one. Operations needed new equipment. Sales needed better leads. Finance needed updated software. Logistics needed more drivers. I approved all of it. By noon, I'd signed off on 14 new initiatives. By 5, I'd met with every key employee. By 6, I'd sent an email to every client, reassuring them that operations were stable and that the company was stronger than ever. It wasn't entirely true, but it would be. Tuesday morning, I got a call from Whitmore. Mr. Brennan, I wanted to let you know that we're renewing the contract. 3 more years. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned it. She hung up. I sat at my desk and stared at the phone. Then I picked it up and called Pruitt. We did it, I said. Did what? We survived. He laughed. I never doubted it. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. The company was stable. The clients were happy. The employees were focused. Everything was back to normal. Except it wasn't. Because my son was gone, my daughter was gone, their spouses were gone, and they weren't coming back. I thought about the email my daughter had sent, the one that said I'd lost them. She was right. But I'd gained something too. I'd gained control. And for now, that was enough. The rest of the week was quiet. No calls from my son, no emails from my daughter, no threats from their spouses, just work. I spent the days reviewing operations, the nights reviewing contracts. By Friday, I'd restructured the entire company. New vendors, new policies, new systems. Everything I'd built over 23 years was still there. But it was leaner now, stronger, and it was mine. At 5 o'clock, I left the office and drove home. The house was dark. I turned on the lights and made dinner. Then I sat in my office and opened the drawer. Inside was the folder with the founder's override. I pulled it out and read it one last time. Then I closed it and put it back. I didn't need it anymore. I'd already used it, and it had worked. I turned off the light and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up early. I made coffee and sat on the back deck. The yard was quiet. The sun was rising. The birds were singing. I thought about everything that had happened, the meeting I didn't attend, the email I wasn't supposed to see, the reversion I filed, the override I invoked. I thought about my son and daughter. I thought about what I'd lost and what I'd gained. I finished my coffee and went inside. There was work to do, always work to do. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was in control, not just of the company, but of my life, and that was enough. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Brennan?" "Yes. This is Aldridge, the arbitrator. I wanted to follow up on the ruling." "What about it?" "I heard about the founder's override and the dissolution of the board." "Yes. I also heard that your children are no longer involved with the company." "That's correct." He was quiet for a moment. "I want you to know that I reviewed the documents you filed. Everything was legal. Everything was proper. But I also want you to know that I think you made a mistake. A lot of people think that. Do you?" I looked out the window. The distribution yard was visible in the distance. Trucks were moving. Shipments were going out. The machine was running. "No," I said. "I don't." "Fair enough. Take care of yourself, Mr. Brennan." He hung up. I set the phone down and went back to work. The days turned into weeks. The weeks turned into months. The company kept running. The clients stayed happy. The employees stayed focused. And I stayed in control. I didn't hear from my son. I didn't hear from my daughter. I didn't expect to. I'd told them to leave. And they had. Maybe someday they'd come back. Maybe someday they'd want to talk. Maybe someday they'd want to try again. But I wasn't counting on it. Because I'd learned something. I'd learned that sometimes the people you build things for don't appreciate what you've built. And sometimes the only way to protect what you've built is to take it back, even if it costs you everything else. I sat at my desk and looked at the folder, the one with the founder's override. I opened it and pulled out the document. Then I read it one more time, and I smiled, because it had worked. They'd tried to take what was mine, and I'd taken it back. Not with violence, not with fraud, not with lies, with the rules I'd written 23 years ago, rules they'd never bothered to read, rules they'd never thought I'd use. But I had, and now the company was mine again, completely, permanently, irrevocably. I closed the folder and put it back in the drawer. Then I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and red. The distribution yard was quiet. The trucks were parked. The day was over. But tomorrow, they'd roll again. Because that's what they did. That's what I'd built them to do. And no one was going to stop them. Not my son. Not my daughter. Not anyone. I turned away from the window and picked up my phone. There was one more thing I needed to do. One more call I needed to make. I dialed the number. It rang twice. Then someone answered. "Whitmore. It's Brennan. I wanted to let you know that the contract renewal is finalized. Everything's in order." Good. I never doubted it. Neither did I. I hung up. Then I walked out of the office, turned off the lights, and locked the door. The building was empty. The parking lot was quiet. I got in my car and drove home. The house was dark. I turned on the lights and made dinner. Then I sat in my office and opened the laptop. There were 43 unread emails. I went through them one by one. Approvals, confirmations, updates. By midnight, I'd cleared the inbox. I closed the laptop and went to bed. I didn't dream. I didn't need to. Because I'd already won. And winning was enough. The company was mine. The control was mine. The future was mine. And no one was going to take it away. Not now. Not ever. I told them it was just formalities.